For 2 years, my son refused to let me see my grandchildren, calling me a toxic grandmother who would damage their lives with my presence. Then a lawyer's mistake revealed my $8 million fortune to him. Suddenly, the woman he'd banned from his family became the most important person in his world. The transformation was sickening, and it taught me everything I needed to know about the man I'd raised. My name is Helen Davis, and I'm 68 years old. I own 3 successful restaurants in Miami, Florida, and I've built a business empire worth more money than most people see in several lifetimes. But wealth means nothing when your own son decides you're too dangerous to be around his children until he discovers exactly how much danger you represent to his bank account. The phone rang at 3:17 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon, exactly 23 minutes after FedEx delivered an envelope to the wrong address. I was in my flagship restaurant, Helen's Kitchen, reviewing inventory reports, when Kevin's name appeared on my caller ID for the first time in 2 years. My hands actually trembled as I answered, because hearing from him could only mean one of 2 things. Either something terrible had happened to my grandchildren, or something had fundamentally shifted in our relationship. "Mom?" Kevin's voice was different, softer, almost nervous. I was wondering if we could talk. Those 7 words contained more emotion than Kevin had shown me since he'd declared me a toxic influence and systematically removed me from his family's life. For 24 months, I had been persona non grata in my son's world, banned from birthday parties, blocked from school events, and told that my judgmental attitude and outdated values were harmful to 7-year-old Alex and 5-year-old Mia's emotional development. "Kevin, what's wrong?" I asked, because in my experience, people don't suddenly reverse 2 years of absolute silence without a compelling reason. "Nothing's wrong. I've just been thinking about us. About the family. About how maybe I was too harsh." The timing was suspicious. In 68 years of life, I've learned that sudden personality changes usually have specific catalysts, and Kevin's transformation from hostile stranger to remorseful son had happened with mathematical precision. What Kevin didn't know was that I'd been expecting this call ever since my lawyer, Mr. Peterson, had called me that morning, mortified and apologetic. "Mrs. Davis, I made a terrible mistake," Peterson had said, his voice thick with embarrassment. "Your estate documents were accidentally delivered to your son's address instead of yours. He would have received detailed information about your assets, your business valuations, and your inheritance plans. $8 million. That's what Kevin had discovered when he opened an envelope meant for me. $8 million built from decades of 16-hour workdays, smart investments, and the kind of relentless determination that Kevin had always seemed embarrassed by. Money I'd accumulated while being a single mother, while putting him through private school and college, while supporting his dreams even when those dreams involved becoming a social media influencer who made a living posting sponsored content about lifestyle products. For 2 years, Kevin had told his wife Brittany, his friends, and anyone who would listen that his mother was problematic. He'd painted me as a controlling grandmother whose traditional values were somehow damaging to his children's modern upbringing. He'd made me the villain in his story of progressive parenting, the backward obstacle standing between his family and their enlightened lifestyle. But $8 million had apparently cured my toxicity overnight. "I think we should meet," Kevin continued, and I could hear something in his voice that I'd never heard before when he spoke to me. "Need. Maybe this weekend? I could bring the kids." After 2 years of being told I was too dangerous to be around my grandchildren, Kevin was suddenly ready to expose them to my toxic presence again. The only variable that had changed was his knowledge of my net worth. Some revelations are more devastating than any insult. How did a grandmother's love become labeled as toxic? The question haunts me every morning as I walk through my flagship restaurant in Miami's bustling South Beach district, surrounded by the empire I built with my bare hands while Kevin was growing up. Helen's Kitchen started as a single food truck 30 years ago, back when I was a divorced mother trying to provide for my son, while he complained that we couldn't afford the same luxuries his classmates took for granted. I wake up every day at 5 a.m. in my waterfront condo, not because I have to anymore, but because decades of grinding work have made early mornings a permanent part of who I am. The view from my floor-to-ceiling windows shows Biscayne Bay stretching toward the horizon, a daily reminder of how far I've traveled from the cramped apartment where Kevin and I lived when he was young. Back then, he seemed proud of my determination to build something better for us. Now, that same work ethic has apparently become evidence of my toxic influence on his children. My sister Rose calls every Sunday morning, and our conversations inevitably turn to the same painful topic: how a family can become so fractured that a grandmother is considered dangerous to her own grandchildren. "I don't understand what happened," Rose often says during our coffee talks at my kitchen island. "Kevin used to adore you. He used to brag about his mother who built a business empire. Now he acts like you're some kind of villain." The transformation began gradually after Kevin married Brittany 3 years ago. Brittany is a lovely woman, I've always thought so, but she and Kevin have embraced a parenting philosophy that seems to view any form of structure or traditional values as potentially harmful to children's development. When I suggested that 7-year-old Alex might benefit from learning basic manners, like saying please and thank you, Kevin accused me of trying to impose outdated social constructs on his son. When 5-year-old Mia threw a tantrum in my restaurant and I gently redirected her attention to a coloring book, Kevin told me I was invalidating her emotional expression and teaching her to suppress her authentic feelings. Every interaction became a minefield where my decades of experience raising children, including Kevin himself, was reframed as evidence of my inability to understand modern child development. My longtime friend and business partner Gloria watches this family drama unfold with the perspective of someone who's known us for 20 years. Gloria helped me expand from 1 restaurant to 3, and she's seen me navigate every challenge from difficult employees to economic downturns. But even Gloria is baffled by Kevin's complete personality change. "Helen, you raised that boy to be successful, independent, and confident," Gloria reminds me during our weekly business meetings. "The fact that he's now claiming your parenting was somehow harmful is ridiculous. He's a successful adult because of how you raised him, not despite it." The breaking point came 18 months ago during Alex's 6th birthday party. I had arrived with a carefully chosen gift, a beginner's tool set designed for children, thinking Alex might enjoy building things the way Kevin used to when he was young. But Kevin took one look at the gift and exploded. "This is exactly the problem, Mom," he'd said in front of the other parents. "You're trying to force gender stereotypes and outdated expectations on my son. Alex doesn't need to be programmed with your generation's toxic masculinity concepts." The tool set was designed for any child who wanted to learn basic building skills, but Kevin had transformed my gift into evidence of my part of its harmful worldview. That night, Brittany sent me a carefully worded text message explaining that they needed space to raise their children according to their values and that my presence was creating unnecessary tension in their family dynamic. 2 years of silence followed, 2 years of missing birthdays, school plays, and the ordinary moments that make being a grandmother meaningful. 2 years of wondering if I'd ever see Alex and Mia again, until a misfiled envelope changed everything. What makes a son so cruel to his own mother? The question became urgent 6 months after Kevin and Brittany imposed their no-contact rule, when I discovered they were actively working to erase me from their children's memories. The revelation came during an accidental encounter at Alex's school that showed me just how far Kevin was willing to go to eliminate my influence from his family's life. I had gone to Sunset Elementary for a community event, a literacy fair where local business owners were invited to read to children. I hadn't known Alex attended the school, but when I saw him in the audience, my heart nearly stopped. For 5 minutes, I watched my grandson from across a crowded cafeteria, memorizing how much he'd grown, how his face had changed, how he looked exactly like Kevin had at that age. When the reading session ended, Alex ran toward me with the innocent excitement of a child who'd spotted a familiar face. "Grandma Helen," he called out, his arms reaching for a hug that I desperately wanted to give him. But before Alex could reach me, Kevin appeared like a wall between us. "Alex, go find your mother," Kevin said firmly, his voice carrying an authority that made my grandson stop in his tracks. Then Kevin turned to me with a coldness I'd never seen before. "What are you doing here?" "I was invited to read to the children," I said, my voice shaking. "I didn't know Alex attended this school." "This is exactly the kind of boundary violation I was talking about," Kevin said loudly enough for other parents to hear. "You're stalking my family now?" The accusation was so outrageous, so publicly humiliating, that I felt physically sick. Other parents were staring, and I could see them drawing conclusions about the grandmother who was apparently so problematic that her own son needed to protect his children from her. "Kevin, I would never—" "Security," Kevin called out, waving over a volunteer coordinator. "This woman is harassing my family. I need her removed from the premises." The humiliation of being escorted out of my grandson's school by security, while Alex watched with confused tears in his eyes, was the lowest point of our estrangement. But it wasn't the end of Kevin's campaign to erase me from their lives. Over the following months, I learned that Kevin had been systematically rewriting family history to his children. When Alex asked about the grandmother he remembered, Kevin told him that some people are not healthy to be around, and that families sometimes have to make difficult choices to protect themselves. I discovered this when Rose ran into Brittany at a grocery store and tried to make casual conversation about the children. Alex asked about his grandmother last week, Brittany had mentioned, apparently not realizing that Rose was my sister. Kevin explained that sometimes adults have problems that make them unsafe for children, and that we had to keep our family safe by staying away from unhealthy people. Rose reported this conversation to me with tears in her eyes, both of us stunned that Kevin had essentially told his children that their grandmother was dangerous. The final blow came when I tried to send birthday gifts through Rose, thinking Kevin might accept presents if they didn't come directly from me. The gifts were returned unopened with a note from Brittany. "Per our previous conversations, we cannot accept items from toxic family members. Please respect our boundaries." My Christmas cards were returned unopened. My attempts to call were blocked. When I tried to send letters, they came back marked, "Return to sender." Kevin had successfully created a narrative where I was the villain in his family's story, the toxic grandmother whose love was somehow harmful to her grandchildren's well-being. For 18 months, this narrative went unchallenged because I had no access to my grandchildren and no way to prove that my intentions were loving rather than harmful. But the envelope that arrived at Kevin's house instead of mine contained information that would test just how committed he was to protecting his children from their grandmother's toxic influence. What would you do if a simple address mix-up revealed your family's true motives? The phone call from my lawyer came at 9:23 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, and Mr. Peterson's voice carried the kind of mortified embarrassment that immediately told me something significant had gone wrong. "Mrs. Davis, I need to inform you of a serious error in my office," Peterson began, and I could hear papers shuffling nervously in the background. "Yesterday's estate document delivery was sent to the wrong address. Your updated will, trust documents, and complete asset disclosure were delivered to your son Kevin's residence instead of yours." The implications hit me immediately. Kevin now knew everything: the exact value of my restaurant empire, my real estate holdings, my investment portfolios, and most importantly, the inheritance structure I'd established for Alex and Mia. He knew that the toxic grandmother he'd banned from his family was worth over $8 million, and that his children stood to inherit a fortune that would set them up for life. "How much did he see?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Everything, Mrs. Davis. The complete financial disclosure, property valuations, business assessments, and the trust fund structures. There's no way he could have opened that envelope without understanding the full scope of your estate." I thanked Peterson and hung up, then sat in my office staring at the Miami skyline while processing what this mistake meant for my family dynamics. For 2 years, Kevin had maintained that his children were better off without their grandmother's influence. He'd painted me as a harmful presence whose traditional values would damage Alex and Mia's emotional development. But now he knew that rejecting me meant rejecting millions of dollars that could fund his children's education, secure their futures, and provide the kind of financial freedom that Kevin, despite his social media success, had never achieved. The test came sooner than I expected. My phone rang at 3:17 p.m., exactly 6 hours and 54 minutes after Peterson's call, according to my calculations. Kevin's name on my caller ID felt like a sick joke after 2 years of complete silence. "Mom?" His voice was different, softer, almost vulnerable. "I was wondering if we could talk." I let the silence hang for a moment, savoring the irony of timing that was too precise to be coincidental. "About what, Kevin?" "About us, about the family, about how maybe I've been too harsh, too unforgiving. I've been doing a lot of thinking lately about family relationships and what really matters." "When did this thinking begin?" I asked, unable to keep the edge out of my voice. "Well, it's been building for a while. But especially today, I just felt this strong urge to reach out and try to heal our relationship. Today, the same day he'd discovered my net worth. "I think I may have been unfair to you," Kevin continued, and I could hear him searching for words that would sound genuine rather than calculated. "Maybe I was too quick to judge your parenting style. Maybe Alex and Mia could benefit from having their grandmother in their lives." The speed of his transformation was breathtaking. The grandmother who had been toxic and harmful for 2 years had apparently been cured of her dangerous influence in the 6 hours since Kevin learned about her bank account. "Are you saying you want to reconcile?" I asked. "I'm saying I want to try. For the kids' sake. They deserve to have a relationship with their grandmother, and maybe I was wrong to keep them away from you. I made a decision that would either expose Kevin's true motivations or give us a genuine chance to rebuild our relationship. Come to dinner this Sunday," I said. "Bring the children. We'll talk." What Kevin didn't know was that I had already made plans to test whether his sudden change of heart was about family or fortune. How do you test whether someone loves you or your money? Sunday dinner provided the perfect opportunity to find out exactly what had motivated Kevin's miraculous transformation from hostile son to remorseful family member. I spent the week preparing both a meal and a strategy that would reveal his true intentions once and for all. Kevin arrived at my condo at exactly 6 p.m. with Brittany and the children, carrying a bouquet of expensive flowers and wearing an expression that looked like a carefully rehearsed approximation of remorse. Alex and Mia seemed confused, but excited to see their grandmother again, and their genuine enthusiasm for our reunion made Kevin's performance even more painful to watch. "Mom, I owe you such an apology," Kevin said as we settled around my dining room table. "I've been thinking a lot about family lately, about what really matters, and I realize I may have been too harsh in my judgment of your traditional approach to things." "What changed your mind?" I asked, serving the children their favorite meals that I'd remembered from before our estrangement. "Well, maturity, perspective. Realizing that different generations have different wisdom to offer, and maybe I was too quick to dismiss your experience." Brittany nodded supportively, though I noticed she kept glancing around my condo with new interest, taking in the expensive artwork and waterfront views that she'd somehow never noticed during previous visits. "I've been thinking about the future," Kevin continued, cutting into his steak with studied casualness, "about what kind of legacy we want to leave for the kids. What kind of family relationships we want them to remember." The word legacy was particularly interesting, given what Kevin had learned about mine. After dinner, while the children played in my living room, I decided to conduct my test. "Kevin, I'm so glad you want to reconcile," I said, pulling out a folder I'd prepared specifically for this moment. "Since we're talking about family and the future, I want to share something important with you." Kevin's eyes immediately focused on the folder with an intensity that confirmed my suspicions. "I've been working with my lawyer to update my estate planning," I continued, watching Kevin's face carefully, "and I've made some significant changes to my will." "Oh?" Kevin tried to sound casual, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. "Yes, I've decided to leave my entire estate to children's charities and educational foundations." Alex and Mia will receive small trust funds for college, but the bulk of my assets, about $8 million, will go to organizations that help underprivileged children. The change in Kevin's expression was immediate and devastating. The carefully maintained mask of family reconciliation cracked, revealing something ugly underneath. "You're giving away the family money?" he asked, his voice sharp with barely controlled anger. "I thought you said my money wasn't important," I replied. "You've spent 2 years telling me that my values and my influence were toxic to your children. Why would you want them to inherit from someone so harmful?" Kevin's face flushed red as he realized he'd been caught. "That's not. I mean, of course, family legacy matters, but that's different from your parenting approach. Is it? Because 20 minutes ago, you were talking about healing our relationship for the children's sake. Now you seem primarily concerned about their inheritance." Brittany looked mortified, clearly realizing that their sudden reconciliation had been exposed as financially motivated. "Mom, you're misunderstanding," Kevin said desperately. "This isn't about money. It's about family." "Then you'll be happy to rebuild our relationship whether I leave you anything or not," I said calmly. Kevin opened his mouth to respond, then closed it, apparently realizing that any argument would only further reveal his true motivations. The silence stretched uncomfortably until Alex looked up from his toys and asked, "Are you and Daddy fighting again, Grandma?" The question broke my heart and clarified everything I needed to know about Kevin's priorities. What's the price of discovering your family only wants your fortune? The weeks following that disastrous dinner taught me that sometimes the most powerful thing a grandmother can do is choose her grandchildren's future over her son's greed. Kevin's reaction to learning about my charitable intentions revealed everything I needed to know about his true character and helped me make the most important decision of my life. Kevin didn't call for 3 days after the dinner, and when he finally did, his tone had shifted from false remorse to barely controlled anger. "Mom, I think you're making a huge mistake with this charity thing," he said, abandoning any pretense of wanting to reconcile for family reasons. "Alex and Mia are your grandchildren. They deserve their inheritance, and you're being selfish by giving away their future to strangers." "Kevin, you spent 2 years telling me I was too toxic to be around your children. Why would you want them to inherit from someone whose values you find so harmful? That's different, and you know it. Family money stays in the family. What you're doing is vindictive." The conversation confirmed what I'd suspected. Kevin's sudden interest in reconciliation had nothing to do with healing our relationship and everything to do with securing his children's inheritance. But his accusation of vindictiveness gave me an idea for one final test. I called Kevin back the next morning with a proposal. "I've reconsidered my estate plans," I said. "I'm willing to restore Alex and Mia's full inheritance, but with conditions." "What conditions?" Kevin asked immediately, his eagerness revealing his priorities. "For the next year, you allow me to see my grandchildren regularly. Weekly dinners, attendance at their school events, holidays together. If, after 12 months of consistent family relationship, you can honestly say that my presence has been positive for the children, they receive their full inheritance. If you decide my influence is genuinely harmful, I'll honor your judgment and maintain the charitable donation plan." Kevin agreed so quickly that I almost laughed. Suddenly, the toxic grandmother's influence was manageable if $8 million hung in the balance. What followed was the most interesting year of my life. Kevin gritted his teeth through family dinners where I helped Alex with homework and taught Mia to bake cookies. He tolerated my presence at soccer games and school plays, constantly monitoring my interactions with his children for evidence of the harmful influence he'd claimed to fear. But something unexpected happened during those 12 months. Alex and Mia flourished with their grandmother's attention. Alex's confidence grew as I helped him with reading, and Mia's anxiety decreased as she found comfort in our quiet afternoon baking sessions. The children were obviously happier with their grandmother back in their lives. Even Brittany began to soften, eventually admitting that she'd never actually agreed with Kevin's assessment of me as toxic. "I think Kevin was threatened by how much the kids loved you," she confided. during one of our conversations. He was jealous of their bond with you and found reasons to make that bond seem unhealthy. At the end of the year, Kevin faced his choice: admit that his mother's presence was beneficial to his children, or maintain that she was harmful and forfeit their inheritance. The decision revealed Kevin's character one final time. He chose the money, grudgingly admitting that perhaps I wasn't as toxic as he'd claimed, but making it clear that his change of heart was purely financial. I honored our agreement and restored the children's full inheritance. But I also added provisions that Kevin couldn't access or control the funds, ensuring that his greed wouldn't compromise Alex and Mia's futures. Today, I have a relationship with my grandchildren that Kevin tolerates rather than cherishes. It's not the family reconciliation I'd hoped for, but it's honest. Kevin gets his children's inheritance secured, and I get to be their grandmother. Sometimes the best family relationships are built on clear boundaries rather than false sentiments. And sometimes the greatest gift you can give your grandchildren is teaching them the difference between love and manipulation, even when the lesson comes at the cost of your relationship with their father.